So my name is Theona Morrison. I'm based in Grimsby, Uist in the Outer Hebrides, and I'm a founder director of CoDel, which is a community lens organisation which works to support young people, particularly the young economically active that have returned or settled in the islands. The background to that was that I had been working in education where we had linked in the Western Isles the curriculum to the local economy because we realised historically we were educating young people to leave the islands. But I had also worked with a colleague who is now another founder director of CoDel, who had worked for the New Economics Foundation, and together we delivered workshops for all senior phase pupils in the Western Isles for many years on an understanding of economic literacy, the resource flows that come in and go out of the islands. And leading from that, there has been a leadership course which has enabled a young leaders group to be formed, and they are taking the lead in the community on issues that are important to them, maybe housing or whatever. Building on that, we have been working with the Irish Islands and supporting young people there, and I can give you examples of how something that was happening in these islands enabled something to happen in one of the Irish islands. But of course, we were working on those Irish islands in March, and we had to come back slightly earlier because Ireland closed down before Scotland. Support for young people is like everybody else. It's through Zoom. We have weekly meetings for anybody who wants to attend. And the weeks alternate, firstly with open space meetings, so people can talk about anything they want to. And the second week, which was actually yesterday, in terms of the alternation, is on mental health. But obviously, given the background and the context of going into COVID lockdown and now considering how we come out of it, then actually, if you didn't know that those meetings were entitled differently, you'd be forgiven for thinking they were one and the same thing, because indeed, don't all those things overlap? You know, a lot of the young people we are dealing with, they have already demonstrated a huge degree of resilience. And if a large proportion of those are returners, not all of them, some of them are new people who've come to communities such as our own, but nevertheless, they've already demonstrated great resilience. So, for example, we had a young couple who are both returners to the islands. They established the distillery, the North Uist distillery, making downpour gin and so on. Now, obviously, in this period of time, things have changed. So they have been producing hand sanitizer. And first of all, they put out an appeal if people could provide them with small little bottles for the sanitizer so they could distribute it free of charge to those at the front line in the caring and so on. But now that hand sanitizer is available for the wider community to buy. We know from other island communities, for example, on Tyree, a young woman there, set up the isle20.com, online platform for Scottish island businesses to be able to present their businesses there and sell online if their footfall through tourism and people coming to and from the islands is going to be affected. And I don't know how many businesses they have on there now, but it's been a phenomenal take-up and I think has probably helped tremendously. One of our other young people who became young tourist businesswoman entrepreneur of the year, something of that order, probably words in the wrong order. She runs Coral Box gift shop on Berneray, just off North Uist. And she has been entirely selling online. She does photography as well. So calendars, postcards, anything you like, really. And frequently you see her tweeting how she's thanking everyone for supporting her locally. And in more generally, we see in a community such as ours, for example, with the fishermen, all their markets collapsed. But, they are now selling much more locally. And furthermore, the locals are actually buying their product. So, we've had excellent langoustines and so on, which hitherto were perhaps not quite so easy to get hold of. And I know from our Zoom meetings, so I think it's easy for people to operate in silos, operate on social media in silos. And I know our politicians have been saying, do they really have a handle on what's going on in the community? Because they're not getting out and about and meeting people like they normally do. So accepting that through the Zoom meetings, we have more of a cross-section of people coming together. So one person I'm thinking of, her working life is entirely supporting people with dementia. We have 2 care homes in the islands here. The residents aren't able to go into the day rooms or receive visitors from their families. So essentially here, like everywhere else, they're almost in solitary confinement, which sounds really grim. That's not entirely right when the carers are going in, but the carers are going in with their PPE covering and so on. So I understand from this person who works with that client group that she has seen quite a deterioration in some of the people with dementia and so on, and a real desperation for them to see the people they know and love. And also this whole balance of, well, if my life is not going to go on for months and years, I'd rather see people I love for a few weeks and my life be shortened than, to be for a very long time in this very isolated state. So, we mustn't overlook that. But we also know that, for example, in the shops, of course, there's the distancing and so on. There is someone in the north of the island who's got early onset dementia and so on. And the people in the shop know this. And the walk to the shop is a really important thing for that lady. So she will ring up the shop and say, is it okay for me to come now? When she goes, they make sure she has her own trolley, which has been sanitized, and somebody will walk behind her, keeping the 2-meter distance as she goes around the shop. Now, if you had a huge supermarket with hundreds of people and people queuing up down the road, you wouldn't be able to do that. So that is a very personalized response to people in the islands here. The local hardware shop, for example, inevitably in an island community like this, people will compare prices in a local hardware shop to what they can get online. However, they have now introduced click and collect, which means you can see whether they've got the product you want. And if you need it today, well, even with the best will in the world, these online huge corporations can only get it to you the next day. So if you can secure it, your name's on it, it's then worth that journey, whatever it is, which if it's from Eriskay or Berneray, it's a round trip of, it could be 60 miles, then it's worth your journey then to go and get whatever it is, and your thing with your name on it is outside the shop and you've paid it. So in a sense, these small businesses have also stepped up to the plate in making it more accessible. Animal feed is being delivered as opposed to you going to get it, because irrespective of what's happening to the human race, the animals still need to be fed. I mean, clearly there was a period of great quietness as everyone took in what on earth was going on. But then you saw ingenuity, creativity, innovation coming to the fore. And I think people in rural and island communities have had to be really resilient over generations, and therefore, that they naturally swing into that. Well, we're going to be doing some work with the Social Enterprise Academy, a social enterprise school for any adults who want to set up some kind of enterprise. And, obviously that was going to involve kind of lunch and meetings and all that kind of thing to explore ideas, economic literacy, looking at what opportunities might be. Well, clearly that isn't going to happen. So we're looking at online kind of coaching sessions. We'll be delivering those. We're already putting out the information about funding and so on, but everything is online. And in one sense, that has an intimacy and a Zoom conversation and so on, but obviously in other ways, you know, you do miss that actual face-to-face contact in the real, so to speak. But like everybody else, we're having to move online, and likewise with our contact with the Irish islands. We clearly are not going over to those islands anytime soon, and they were going to be coming here. But we are in contact online, and like-for-like businesses, peer-to-peer support, the brewery in Inishbofin, the distillery here, you know, all those kind of things where they're in a similar social and economic context, then we can put them in touch and be as supportive as we can be, albeit in a technological way rather than a face-to-face way.